So in chapter 9 we wrote this. Okay. And the only thing I took out was these weird, really long underscore areas that separated the RGB value with the next readout of RGB. So now what happens is I get this, and if I change it to another R, I get it right next to each other without the underscore going across. That's pretty important now, because what we want to use is this data into the processing language, and the readout doesn't really understand like a character return or a line wrap. Okay, so we want very short, succinct data. It could be labeled like this, but I wouldn't go much further than having it right about here, or it's going to get messy. And then if it does get messy, you can always write out the user interface to be a little bit bigger to support that. Okay, so there is options to say a whole sentence if you wanted to, as long as you made the processing application a little bit bigger. Okay, so now we get into the heart of the matter. So here's my simple serial, and now we're just going to add to it. The first thing we got to do is understand that there is a font, and well, I'll save this here in a little bit. So I want to add a font to this so it can export that font, and that's one thing about this that's kind of a pain. You have to state the font. Okay, BF for font, and the font's going to be labeled F. Okay, so that's kind of, you can think of that as an integer, sort of, kind of ish, saying that the font's going to be F. Okay, in the void setup, we have to do a few things. The void setup, we're going to say F is equal to create font Arial. We're going to case that within quotes. And then we're going to have to state a few other things, like what size font. Well, 16 I'm going to be using. And is it a true type font? Yes, it's true type. So you can use any font off the internet, but you have to state it. And I would stick to true type fonts, to be honest with you. So that's what we have to do in void setup. Not a whole lot. Now in our code, we have to add a few things. Right now I got fill 0 for right here. Got that. Now I have to read the information back from the Arduino unit. Remember, the Arduino unit is spitting out this right here, red, green, blue. So I have to state, what's that look like? Again, I need to get that information back into the processing language. So to do that, I have to initialize a string. So the string is the in buffer, I'm calling it, and it doesn't matter what you call it. It could be banana sandwich, but I use in buffer because it makes sense to me. My port, period, read string. Later I'll show you where I'm getting all this good information for processing. Then you can play around a little bit more with it, but just by looking at these examples, you'll pick up a lot. Okay, so there we go. We have that. Now, anytime I use this, anytime I hit B in the keyboard, it's going to do that. It's going to read. So I'm going to have to do that per thing, per item. Paste that. So I do that right after the write statement. Perfect. Okay, then after that, we're going to have to write a little bit more code after each if statement. Kind of looks like this. So after delay, we say fill 255. And then we're writing a new rectangle out. And the rectangle is going to be rectangle. It's going to be placed on 10x and 80y in a 200 by 200 example. Well, how can we do that? We can't do that because really our our little square right here is 50 by 50. So up above, we have to state a new world here. And the new world is under void setup. So let me find that real quick. So under void setup, there's one more thing we have to do. We have to state our world to be size of a new 200 by 200. So now we have a new dinner plate, and the new dinner plate is 200 by 200. That way, when we do write this magical new rectangle, it fits within the 200 world. See? It'll all come clear. Now this is the hard part, is like making buttons for this thing, really. You know, because you have to state where it is in X and Y. And the first one's X and the second one's Y. And then how big that rectangle is going to be. Alright, now we need text font to be initialized, and F of 16. So here we could change that if we wanted to. We could say 18 if we wanted to. But at least we now have the option right here below. And we're going to say fill of 0. For that little area. And we're going to also say text is going to be quote, whoops, open bracket, quote, quote. Okay, so actually I don't want to say anything there. I could say the data is, I could label the actual data here if I wanted to, but I don't want anything. It's just a preliminary thing. You got to do it. And plus, and I want to write out in buffer. And the in buffer, the text, the everything is going to be on 10, 10x, and 100. So 10 pixels down, 100 pixels, oh no, 10 pixels left and right. So in this case, right, 100 pixels down. You're like, what? Trust me, you'll get it. Okay, so let's look at this code. Missing a semicolon. Oops. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, what else we got? Oh, yep, serial code's open, or serial port's open. So this is what we got. We got a 200 by 200 world, and if I hit B on the keyboard, it'll say null at first, and then I hit B on the keyboard again, and it'll spit out my value of blue, which is now 10. And if I hit B on the keyboard, it'll go up to 20 and 30, and you can see the RGB value, or blue value, is going up as we do this. Very cool, right? Yeah, we got a little readout and everything. Not too bad. If we want to trim this, let's say, see how it's kind of going off the outside of the world. Maybe say 150 would be better. So let's try that. So I'll show you how to tweak this value. And I'll hit B, B, And so there we go. We got a nice little value. And should it be XY? So let's change this one to be 140. And let's state our world to be a little bit bigger. Let's say 250. And that looks a lot better. So that's how you start changing your world, changing the rectangle value, everything else. So in order for that to be across all these keys, right after delay of 1000, you just have to do this. Copy that, paste it, and then let's relaunch it. Alright, let's hit B on the keyboard. Okay, let's hit R on the keyboard. Let's hit G on the keyboard. Now you see there's a little bit of a delay here because I put the delay to be 1000. Now maybe 1000's a little big, but it works quite well for what I like. You know, you might want to, you can go down to 500 if you wanted to, but I just put it up there. Very cool. So there we are able to get our modulated value, our pulse width modulation, the voltage readout of this RGB LED, and have a nice little interface for it too. And we can tweak this a little bit more and say that, you know, I don't need a whole lot more room than this. I can maybe shrink those values up, but then I would have to shrink up all the values across now. So you should probably do that when you first did the red value. If not, you're going to be going through each one of these, and instead of 140 you would write 120 or 110 just to shrink this up a little bit. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed the interface with processing to Arduino language and how it works as a very simple understanding thing. And then as we move on, we'll be looking at more and more ways to use this technology. Until then, enjoy.